Welcome to 2017, our series of the Overland Workshop. You all know Paul Marsh. Paul Marsh is my guest here on the Canning Stock Route. We are right in the middle of Western Australia, one of the world's most loneliest public tracks. What we've decided to do this year is get back to basics.
Absolutely. I think, for most people who've never actually got into overlanding, where do you start?
Yeah.
And we can actually help them with that.
So we've called it Overlanding 101. So the series that we're doing now is all about, getting back to basics.
The basics for people who've never really got involved in it.
Never really done it before, or just starting out.
Absolutely.
And this morning's discussion is going to be about where to find information, good places to find information, and how to know what you don't know, which is a challenge.
Well, the hardest part for anyone is there's a lot of information available these days. You can get on the internet, you've got forums, you've got people dishing out free advice, and then the challenge is sifting through that information. And you really need to sift through that information very carefully and distill the valuable gems of information that people share with you that are going to enable you to enjoy your trip, to take the right equipment, the right vehicle.
Yes.
Not spend money on the latest gadgets which you probably don't need.
Yes.
The philosophy we keep going back to? Simplicity.
Yes.
How magic is it being on the Canning Stock Route and how simple we're living?
Well, some people would say that we're not living simply.
Well,
it's all relative,
I
guess.
It is, yeah.
We are living comfortably,
yeah,
but we haven't got unnecessarily frivolous kit.
So really what we're looking at, what do you actually need? And you hit the nail on the head, to almost look at what you don't know. And it's a scary thought, but you don't know what you don't know until you're actually exposed to a whole realm of information and you get a new world of understanding that actually this outdoor adventure, overland travel, has a new set of parameters, a new set of guidelines, a new set of responsibilities.
So perhaps what we should do then is talk about places you can get information.
Absolutely.
And our feelings towards them, because let's start with forums, internet forums.
Well, they're good. You've been involved with forums.
I personally hate forums.
Well, the problem with forums is there's a lot of people who put out some amazingly good information on forums.
Yes.
And then you get a lot of people who just chip in on comments. And that you can't, as a person absorbing that information, really understand what information is that person sharing from and what background are they sharing it from. So what experience do they have when they're giving that information on the forum? You don't know. You're getting a piece of information on the forum and you have no idea
of the
credibility or his experience or her experience. And that's really what the basis for me and anyone is saying, the information you want to absorb and take on board is from a credible source with good experience, good background, good knowledge, sound knowledge.
But how do you know that? My own personal view on forums is, I've seen some such bad advice put on forums, and it's I've seen it that somebody has gone on a trip and now they know everything. And let's face it, there are so many experts in this four-wheel drive scene. Everybody's an expert, but the thing is that so many of these experts really are experts, but so many of them are just weekend warriors, which is a cliche, but they have done one trip, maybe two, and now they know everything. And so a lot of the advice is actually quite bad. So how does one sift through the good from the bad on forums?
On forums, I think it's really difficult. I think you'd be struggling to actually get that. I always like to think that it's a relationship you build with someone. If I'm building a vehicle for a client, it's a relationship we build. And in the first introduction that we share, I need to understand who they are, and they need to understand who I am. I need to know that if I'm going to give them advice, I'm giving them the advice that's suitable for them, not just any advice.
Which is not possible on a forum. You'll get a very, very broad
You can't do
spectrum.
that. So that's what you want to build.
How would you, let's put the scenario together. How would you, as a beginner, say, okay, I want to, my vehicle, I've done a trip and vehicle was obviously overloaded and it didn't handle very well with the load. I need to upgrade my suspension. This is a very common one, right?
Yeah.
How would you, because now you've got all of these different brands trying to sell their product, okay, commercialism, but how do you find out what's going to be good for A, your vehicle, and B, your purposes? Where are you going to get, where would you suggest somebody go and get good information? Obviously not advertisements in a magazine.
No, magazines and
Where
even
else?
some of the outlets, you can go into outlets where people are kitting out vehicles and they'll do some beautiful work, but they're there to sell you products. But if you went in and you found that some of the businesses have been started by guys who have a great passion for the outdoors, have done many trips, and actually they've been there, they've lived it, they've learned the hard lessons of overloading the vehicle. And it's fine to take your vehicle and say, I need a new suspension, but the guy might turn around and say, maybe you should lessen the weight in your vehicle, and then we'll fit the right suspension. And let's go through the vehicle and see what you absolutely don't need. Those are the people who've got the gems of experience, the people who've actually been there, who've done trips around the world, who've been in different situations, that you can get their advice. And when you're on a one-to-one relationship with someone, and you're talking to someone, it's probably a good idea to understand what questions would you pose to a person to understand how credible is the information they're giving you. So if I'm going to sit down with you, Andrew, very quickly I'm going to understand that you have enormous experience. And just by asking a few simple questions, I will understand whether you actually know what you're talking about and whether the advice you're going to give me is going to be good, sound advice. And it's easy to dish out advice, but how many people actually listen to you, the client, as to what you want and what your circumstances are before they dish out the advice?
Okay, so what would you say? Okay, so now I'm putting myself in the position of a newbie going there and excited about this. And what are the red flags? Because I've got a few red flags that I think. What are the red flags that somebody may say that are warning? Hang on, whoa.
Well,
what would
the
you
thing
say
is,
those red flags are?
It's like anything. If you're going into a business or you're sitting down with someone to talk to them and they're giving you advice, are they listening to you? Are they asking you questions, or are they just trying to shovel down huge amounts of advice down your throat?
Good point. Are they asking you questions?
If they ask you questions and they're actually trying to understand where you're coming from, are you a weekender where you're just going to go away for short weekends? In other words, your truck needs to be loaded and unloaded because you use it for multiple purposes. Very different scenario from someone who's actually going on 3-4 week holidays as opposed to someone who's going for a year-long trip. They're very different setups. They're very different approaches, and they have a very different attitude to how you would interact with that person and the advice you're going to give them.
Right.
So I'd say that if someone is actually going to sit down and take the time to understand who I am, ask the right questions, and I want to know, that they need to ask me questions like, Andrew, what are you going to do with your vehicle? Are you going to use it just for weekends? Is it a vehicle that's going to be loaded for you and then going, how many people are going to go away on the trip? Is it 2 people? Is it 4 people? How much luggage you're going? What environment are you going to? Are you doing the canning stock route? And that's a very different scenario from a weekend up the coast.
I would also say another red flag, and I agree with you 100% with that. Another red flag to me is if the store or whatever is really we're the only ones. Now, when I hear somebody saying we're the only ones who know how to do it, when I hear that, I just think, no, you're not. And that to me is a huge red flag.
Yeah.
I was recently talking to the guys about driver training in Western Australia, and I won't mention the organisation. We're the only ones who know how to let down tyres and measure the exact we're the only ones. And I thought, you have got to be kidding me. And immediately,
That's sad, actually, yeah.
Huge red flag.
Yeah.
No, you're not. And the attitude is, you're not learning because you think you know it all.
Well, I would say one step further, they're also not listening. Because when you're standing out there and you're on your little soapbox, I have met some amazing people who are old guys who've done years and years of travel through the bush, who have taught me such valuable lessons, even now. And I've got years like you, years and years of experience, and traveled all around the world on expeditions. And I love meeting someone who can share a gem of advice, perhaps for conditions that we're in now, and you go, have you thought about this? And you think, wow. So, advice, it's no use doing a course in a country which is full of mud and you're going to drive in a desert. That's not real. You'll learn something, but you're not going to learn enough for what you're being, where you're going to be.
So the advice you're seeking, it has to be absolutely relevant to what you're doing, where you're driving, the specific truck that you're using or building. So that's important. That generic advice.
So you're getting a scenario. Absolutely. So generic advice has some value, but what it's going to start telling you is the person just focused on one product or brand? So there's a multitude of products in the market. So I always look at the stage and say, okay, we're going to start off by finding a vehicle. We'll be talking about that. Then you're going to look at what equipment you add onto the vehicle, and that's another thought process and discussion that's got to happen. And then from there we look at what is the equipment we put in the vehicle. Now there's a lot of equipment. We're spoiled for choice compared to 30 years ago, what we didn't have then. And there's so many inconceivable gadgets and things you don't need, quite honestly. But they can be nice to have. And it's that discernment of what equipment is really good quality, good value, and it's going to last me. Because some equipment is fine for a weekend trip, but it's not going to last for 6, 8, 10, 12 months road trip.
So really what you're saying is that those people seeking advice cannot take it from one source and must research it, because you might get an idea on a forum, and the forums do have some value. I'm not killing them completely.
Absolutely.
So you get a piece of advice on a forum that says this particular shock or this particular rack or this particular tent is really cool, was really great, and then go further than just that. Yeah. Don't take one person's advice.
Well, you can get negative advice too, and people will go, well, these shocks are terrible.
Well, I had that same thing.
They're not at all.
Absolutely, I've seen that. And in fact, I learned something very interesting while building my recent troop carrier, was that I went to a place to have I chipped the motor, and I know the chip, and I know that product very well. I just do. But what I learned there is that these people were Land Cruiser specialists. And what that meant was that they could look at my brand new V8 and say, these are the weaknesses of this engine, these are the strengths. We're going to sort out the weaknesses, and in terms of my application. So what are you doing with it? Long trips,
Exactly.
Oh, long trips, out of town, long distance, weeks in the wilderness. You need to take care of the fuel.
And the vehicle's loaded fully, constantly.
Why? But he was saying, particularly fuel. Oh, fuel, yes. Outback areas, poor quality fuel, you must add a fuel filter to this engine.
Absolutely.
And he knew that because he was a Land Cruiser specialist. So if you take it to a general, what I'm saying is that there was a source of fantastic information, because all they do is work with Land Cruiser, and most of them are V8s, so they knew the problem long before I had it.
And
I trusted their advice
guys,
completely.
Yes, and I'll bet you those guys have actually been out in the bush and travelled out and done that. So really, what we're saying is trying to find good advice is ultimately you build a relationship with someone you trust. And I think the trust is the main thing. You're trusting someone with basically your life, because they're building a vehicle for you to go into very remote places. They're equipping it with equipment that's going to serve you in those remote places. And you also need to ask yourself, what information and knowledge don't you have? As we said, to know what you don't know. How much mechanical advice or how much mechanical experience do you have? Are you equipped enough to change a fuel filter in the middle of nowhere when you've picked up some bad fuel? Critical, and you need to know that. But if you don't know that you don't know that, it's hard to. So that's where I think valuable advice, and it's not just about building a vehicle or equipping a vehicle with equipment. It's actually more than that. It's basically a complete picture where you build up someone's experience. Going overland is the vehicle is part of it. It's part of the fantastic experience. You've just had that. You've just enjoyed the experience of building this troopy. It's come out beautifully, and we're really enjoying the truck. But that was part of your journey. So if someone says to me, I'm gonna embark on overland travel, it's not just about having a vehicle with all the kit. It's about the process of building the vehicle. It's educating yourself in different aspects of knowledge that you don't know, that's going to equip you for travel. It's going to give you those the fun trying out new products and seeing what works and what doesn't work. But ultimately, you want to have a rounded experience that's going to make you feel confident to go off into a place like the Canning Stockroom by yourself, feeling confident in your vehicle, the knowledge you have about fixing your vehicle, about looking after yourselves in the wild, medically and security, all those aspects balance out knowledge that you need to actually go on an overland trip. And that's what we're going to share.
Right. In terms of your people seeking out information and knowledge, we spoke about forums and advice from resellers and sellers and clubs and things like that, really sometimes quite valuable, because you've got particularly home in on those people who are like you, doing a similar types of trips as you. Others that might have the same vehicle as you, and they've kind of got the platform is similar to what you're creating. That's a really good one. What works, what doesn't, and they will most gladly say this was rubbish, and just as gladly say this is fantastic. So you get a nice balance. You know.
Yeah, and that the other place to look is companies who actually hire out vehicles. You'll find that the guys often who've started companies have started it out of a passion. And if you can find those people, they're rentals. They're either rentals or they take people on tag-along tours. Now, someone taking groups on tag-along tours has probably seen every different vehicle set up 20 or 30 different ways and has had to deal with the problems and aftermath of all those problems. Those guys are fantastic because they've got a wealth of experience, but they don't sell that experience. They're often glad to share it because of the passion that they share. But when you're giving out free knowledge and free advice, people often don't respect it.
You actually make a very, very good point. Free advice is often not respected purely because it's free.
I go to someone if I'm going to ask them for their advice, and first off, I'm going to offer to pay them for it, because that way I set a tone. I'm prepared to pay you for your 30 years of knowledge that you're going to make. You're going to save me. The money I pay you is a fraction of what it'll cost me by making all the mistakes that I'm going to make.
That's very true.
So it's actually, that attitude sets the right attitude for learning.
Yeah.
It actually sets the right attitude for a relationship that you build with someone. Yeah. And I think that way, we're all in it to enjoy it, but some of us, that's our living.
Just to wrap up, that's outstanding. That's a really good piece of advice. To wrap it up, I want to talk a little bit about magazines. Now, I've written for magazines and worked with magazines for many, many years. And it's a bit of a generalization what I'm going to say now. But reviews of products in magazines, I don't find them particularly valuable because so often the magazine will temper their criticism. They'll pull back on the criticism because they're relying on advertising from manufacturers. And manufacturers of all kinds of equipment will go to the magazine and advertise there. And if they're constantly seeing negative stuff especially about their own product, but even other people's products, they tend to, I don't know if I want to advertise in that magazine because look what they did with so-and-so's trailer. They gave it a bad review. So it's very bad for the magazine advertising industry. So magazines tend to temper their criticisms and they pull them way back. So, however, when a magazine does a comparison, I was reading a comparison between the Max Trax traction thing, and they had about 6. It was so typical of a magazine. Although I read the whole thing and actually found it really good. Yeah. But the ones that were, and I know some of these traction aids, and they're not good. They do not work when things get wet. They're hopeless because of the kind of plastic they've used.
Yeah, sure.
And the lack of lugs and various things. And they didn't say they were terrible. They said that they weren't quite as good as, and of course the Max Trax is one of the best, and there are others, very good ones out there, and they did get to the top of the, first, second and third.
Sure.
So looking at what's the best ones and what are the worst ones, it was a fair indication. I don't think the magazine fudged that. I think they were honest.
Generally magazines will put one thing they do is they put product out there. So, when you're looking, you're trying to look at what's on the market. Now, you can schlep around all the stores and you might be able to look. Or you could look in a magazine and you get a nice comparative blend of products. It's up to you then to actually read that, filter the information. It's always what I say to prospective people I work with. You've taken and absorbed all this information. You're coming to me to be your filter, and I'm going to filter the information through my experience. It's like a purifier, and I'm going to give you really clean, good advice based on years and parameters of travel and building vehicles and all that. And that gives someone something of value. And that's the main thing you're trying to do. The magazines have a place. The forums have a place. Websites have a place. We spend ages trawling through websites. Some are better than others, and they'll do a better sales pitch. But at the end of the day, any information you get, it's your responsibility to take that responsibility and filter the information so you get the best possible information for your application, and basically the success of your overland career.
Excellent. I think we've covered most things.
Yeah, I think it's a good. Well, this is the start.
This is the start. We've got a whole lot to come.
Plenty.
We're filming this year. Thank you for joining us, and of course supporting our programs. Check out Patreon. It's the way that you can contribute, and the way that you can make sure we make lots more of them. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
If you would like to be part of what I do and help me make more videos, support me on Patreon. Click the Patreon button on the screen now.